Hello again. There are nearly 10,000 species of bird in the world, occupying nearly every conceivable habitat. Of these, 305 are birds of prey and 225 are owls. Of these 225 owls, one entire family alone comprises the barn owls, of which there are 16 species around the world and many subspecies. The British barn owl, once worryingly rare due to habitat loss and being at the edge of its natural range, is now protected but stable or increasing. It is easily bred in captivity. The channel is for you if you want to know what it takes to work with animals. Every week, I interview an animal industry professional. This week's guest is Mark Birdsall, who runs 3 bird companies. He works with owls, eagles, and other bird species. There are about 60 species of eagle in the world. Many are bred in captivity, including at falconry centres in the UK. Mark runs a bird of prey centre, a pest control company, and he also breeds birds for sale. If you want to work with birds of prey, there are various careers open to you. The most lucrative is as a falcon breeder. Then there is being a specialist avian vet, a pest control technician, a display giver, author and publisher, or a field biologist. Mark talks about his 3 bird businesses and the personal qualities he looks for in new entrants and potential new recruits into his businesses. If you want to work with birds of prey, it is inevitable that you will have to start out as a volunteer. Then, seek to develop your knowledge of the birds a person works with. Also, your self-confidence, your people skills, a big one that, the ability to listen and retain instructions, and have a willingness to do anything. And if you want to do bird flying displays for an audience, be outgoing and flamboyant. I started by asking Mark how his own career developed.
From when I was a kid, it was something I always wanted to do. At home, we used to breed small bird species. I had an opportunity to volunteer at a bird of prey rescue centre fairly close to us. So it gave me a bit of an insight into sort of what went on, and I learned a lot about birds of prey. And all through secondary school, by this point, I already had birds of my own through secondary school, but it's what I always wanted to do. And they always tried to put me off at school because they didn't really know in what category being a falconer sort of dropped into. And they were like, well, the only thing we can put it close to is being a zookeeper. And I was like, that's not what I want to do. And that's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a falconer and I'm going to work at a bird of prey centre. And that is what I'm going to do with my life. And for instance, when we had to do work experience for school, I managed to get work experience at Jemima's, at the International Centre for Birds of Prey in Gloucestershire. When I finished, Jemima said to me, "You can stay on for a bit longer if you want." And I ended up staying for 2 months. Then when I came home, I was sort of just in the right place at the right time, I think. The rescue centre I used to work at, they were moving to a bigger site. And they were willing to take me on in those olden days of the YTS scheme. That's pretty much what it was. As long as I partake in some of the other courses that they ran, they were like, we're happy to pay you a wage. So I did all those things while I was working full time at the Raps Foundation. So it was all right. None of the courses I did had anything to do with anything I wanted to do, but it's the only way that they pay me wages. At that time, they had Professor John Cooper come and build a hospital facility, who's sort of the leading bird of prey vet really in the world, really, John Cooper. And so, again, I learned a lot about rescue and injuries. So again, I started to build a little more knowledge about different types of birds that they were getting brought in. And it was, harrises and red tails and, eagle owls, kestrels. So again, I just had the opportunity to build on that. And I stayed there for probably about 5 years. And then I got sort of itchy feet because I wanted to, we were limited to the birds we had. Okay, I enjoyed the rescue, but I really enjoyed demonstration. Demonstration's my thing. I wanted to then move to a centre where I could push that side of things a little more and have the opportunity to perhaps build on the species, that I was ever going to be able to fly and use. So at that point, I moved to Cheshire and ran a centre at Cheshire. They pretty much just jumped me straight in. There was just me and one other lad, and they just gave me and him the run of the place. The centre was in a bit of a state. It was a nice little centre, but they were struggling. It was quite disjointed and struggled with what sort of direction they were going in. And as we started to turn it, the boss just went, "Do whatever you like. Tell me what you want to buy and we'll buy it." And so I stayed there for a long time, 10 years or more. We got to a point, I think, when you're running a centre for other people, you have an idea of what you'd like to do, I think. We got to a point where we were immensely busy. Because I'm running it, we had like 4 full-time staff, we had a couple of part-timers, we had a lot of volunteers. And you get to a point where you're running a centre rather than actually partaking in the day-to-day excitement of being in the centre. And it just got to a point where, all the lads were doing the experience days and doing demo. So I'm sat doing zoo license paperwork or, all the other jargon that goes along with, just doing diary, emails, phone calls, bookings, and never actually getting to fly birds. And so I just went, I've had enough now. And I stayed in Cheshire and just moved down the road to a little collection. And they just had 15 birds probably, and just were offering it to guests to fly birds who were staying in a hotel. It was a big wedding venue. So they did a lot of them would have like a flying demonstration while reception drinks were going on and so on, and on the Golden Eagle. And that was nice, and I enjoyed that for a little while, and I did that for a few years. And then we came to Lincolnshire because most of my family live around this area. So we were here on holiday, me and the missus, and we randomly came to my dad, who was running like the pet department in site that I'm at now at Bay Tree Garden Centre, and they had an owl centre on the side, which I never really knew about. And we went in to have a look. It was a poke and stroke outfit. It's something I'm really against, of just having birds that just get strapped to a glove and just get mauled. That's not really my thing at all. Really randomly, it transpired that the people that were running it at the time were planning on leaving. They just got their zoo. They've just been going through zoo licensing, and zoo license have been quite critical again of the way the centre ran, of obviously being a poke and stroke, not really flying things. The centre was very disjointed and really run down. It wasn't very busy, so they didn't really have any money to afford to do very much. So randomly, my dad phones me that night and said, "Will you come back tomorrow? Because the owner of the garden centre has asked if you can come and go round the owl centre with him and just perhaps give him some pointers into what needs to happen, because the council had closed it down twice." And they pretty much got to a point where the council had gone, if this doesn't get better, that's it. We're going to revoke the zoo license. So we went round and we had a sit down in the restaurant at the end, and it'd been there for 30 years pretty much. And he said, I'm just really disappointed with how it's turned out in the end. We've had lots of birds here. They had some really nice rare owl species that were just sat in squalor, really. And so I just said, look, whoever comes in next, you're going to have to try and set it up differently. And he just said to me, do you want to come and do it? And randomly we decided we would. There's hardly any bird of prey stuff around here. So, from that point of view, we knew, it was quite a good spot to attract people in. And we said, if we can run it differently, we can probably make a good go of it. And so I've been here for 10 years now. And we've got probably nearly 100 birds now. We have a raven and Serena and the kookaburras and a little lilac-breasted roller and all that. And we have a really successful breeding program, to be fair. We have Nugget falcons and tawny eagles. We've got African white-backed vultures. Most of my eagles that I fly are problematic birds from other centres. It's sometimes nice to be able to use your brain a bit to think about different methods of training some new species. So, and within the last 10 years, pest control with, using birds has become very, very popular. Any type of lethal method of pest control is obviously becoming more difficult to use and to include. So we're always trying to find obviously more eco-friendly methods of doing these types of things. And I don't actually do any myself, to be fair. I run a pest control company, but don't actually do it. Because I just subcontract it out to other people, because I physically haven't got enough time in the day to do it. I'm really just sort of safeguarding my future a little bit of just going, if the owl centre, ends up having to disband for one reason or another, then I still have a backup plan of, obviously, yes, I still breed birds, but on top of that, I've got a pest control business that I could literally just go and do myself if I had to. At the minute, I have several contracts that are flying birds at sites a couple of times a week, and actually probably earn 5 times more money than I do now from running a centre. Ultimately, all the staff all earn more than I do, and I have to just sort of tag along at the back, working every hour God sends to try and keep the place ticking over, and obviously we're all just getting over the COVID. It's just really, really tricky for all the small collections at the minute to keep their head above water, and everybody's struggling. And we're all just trying to find new ways of doing things to keep us afloat. And it's very hard at the minute. And, for people coming into it and seeing the glamour of the front of house, that's all very well and good. But behind the scenes, especially with, there's a lot of new zoo license regs coming in. There's obviously, even daft things like, minimum wage goes up, in April this month. And, we sit there going, right, the staff are on now like an extra £1 an hour. Well, damn it, £1 an hour. Where are we pulling that from? Anyway, that was 20 minutes of your life you'll not get back.
It's fair to say you've got 3 income streams, yes? The pest control business using hawks,
yes,
the breeding program,
yes,
and the bird of prey centre.
Yes.
What skills does a person need, Mark, to do what you do?
Again, from all 3 aspects, 3 very different management tactics in a way. Obviously, from a breeding bird's perspective, obviously knowledge of the species is a difficult thing to collate, and that just comes with years of in a way of managing that species to begin with. In some ways, understanding the day-to-day management of a particular species of bird. There are some centres where you can go and do incubation courses and learn a lot about breeding and AI, and that's one particular avenue I don't do. Where obviously there's the big falcon breeders who sell birds, to Saudi and to Dubai, and that's where, probably what we call the big money is. Being a big falcon breeder, those guys are focusing on just that job. That takes focus every day and night through the breeding season, and that takes a lot of commitment. But I'd say it's understanding the species and understanding, incubation, AI, breeding and rearing, and that's a very different set of skills on its own. Management of the staff, understanding your product and how it works. Even though, yes, we only really fly birds and do some proofing, there's still understanding the different aspects that people feel that they should try. And still looking at other aspects of pest control, even though we're not doing it, of people going, well, why can't I buy these visual deterrents and these audio deterrents to try and deter the galls, and for them to understand that these products don't work, and how this particular site works is different to another site. So again, understanding, do we need harrisawks for this job? Do we need falcons for this job? Gull numbers are decreasing, and there's been a notable decline in gull numbers in coastal areas, but it's really because they've all moved more inland. We're now having to figure out different methods of managing gulls, and whereas it used to be very easy, for instance, to get licensing for nest and egg removal, that's very difficult now because that's classed as a lethal method. But now they're steering everybody to be doing a lot of proofing. So again, that's a different thing altogether. Proofing courses and understand. Then this is a different level of skill, and a lot of different qualifications and skills needed for this. So a lot of falconers are now having to become a little more multi-purpose. Yes, you're a falconer and you used to fly hawks, but now you need to know how to use a cherry picker. Flying hawks on its own doesn't strictly work on its own in a lot of cases. Yes, the birds being there works at the time the birds are there, but then outside of that, in a lot of cases, the gulls are coming back in. It's understanding your customer base. I find for the centres, something I find a lot of falconers struggle with is understanding that the general public don't like the same things that you like. And as much as we all love to spend 20 minutes watching a falcon go up to 3,000 feet to a little dot in the sky and put in a massive stooping dive, the single mum with her 4 kids that are running around like your arena like lunatics because they're bored out their school and they can't see what you're looking at, would much rather have an harrisawk whip past their ear hole, and that will keep the kids sat on the bench for a bit longer. And so it's just understand. I think that's where our demonstration works well. Birds are out for a short period of time. It's quite intense, and the birds are very close to where people are sat, and we get a really good response because we understand the customer base. Sometimes it's just sitting back and going, looking at and talking to the public and saying, what do you like? What don't you like? A lot of falconers don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear their opinion. So someone else's opinion into, you don't fly birds, so how would you know? I don't class people as competition to me. I want us all to be able to get on and, and achieve, a good centre, a good demo, a good experience day. And that lifts the standard of practice then across the board. Nowadays, there's a lot of paperwork. Obviously, zoo licensing is really hard work now. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of just having to sit here, most of my evenings doing zoo license paperwork, stock lists and weight sheets and, and all the day-to-day maintenance lists. And then looking for research projects. And obviously bigger centres, you can flourish out a little bit, where zoo licenses are always pushing you to try and expand your horizons a little bit in the site. And we're looking at new things all the time to try and boost conservation or research projects. And so, like for instance, we have a big tank where we breed harvest mice. People sit there for ages watching the harvest mice. It's really lovely. There's like 20 odd in the tank. There's always loads running about. But the guy in Norfolk who does a re-release program, because harvest mice are quite heavily in decline, and so I breed harvest mice to basically give youngsters, and there's a couple of the local colleges, they've started breeding harvest mice as well. And we're all trading ones round, so we've got fresh blood in. But then youngsters are going to this guy for a re-release program. And sometimes we'll jump out there for a day, like, where are you this week? And I go, I'm going so-and-so. And we'll go and have a run out just to go and see, what's involved and what goes on, because we're interested. I mean, harvest mice, feed barn owls and kestrels. So in a roundabout fashion, that's important to me. We've been talking about microchipping harvest mice this week. Who would have thought that part of my job was microchipping harvest mice, to see where they go, to see if they turn up in barn owl pellets? You can work at a falconry centre, but you don't have to do falconry. There's other things you can be doing. You can be doing bird ringing or nest box building or microchipping harvest mice.
Mark, I'm glad you mentioned about the harvest mice. With new zoo regulations that are coming in the not too distant future, bird of prey centres are going to have to be linked to conservation projects. It sounds like the Harvest Mouse project fits in perfectly with that criterion. What's your view on it and how it's going to affect other centres?
It's a big part of zoo licensing now is being associated with sort of conservational projects and research projects that we can do in centre. So the problem that obviously that we have from, for instance, like a research perspective is the only two sort of real options that a lot of us have are contacting maybe like a local university or a college and seeing if like a student wants to do a study on maybe molted feathers. Or in my case, because I breed a lot of birds, for instance, I freeze all the eggshells and they have a look at, eggshell thickness. Or, for instance, one thing that we thought that we could get on board with, and something that I'm doing with one of my lads at the minute, is we've set him up with a BTO ringing mentor. He can go out and basically learn to get a bird ringing license. We're just sort of setting up in the background at the minute of basically us making nest boxes for owls and kestrels and the like, so he can go and put them up, and then we monitor the boxes. He can then ring youngsters, and that data can be fed back to BTO. So that's ticks two boxes in a way: a bit of research and a bit of a conservational project. It's a little unrealistic how zoo license and regs work.
I hear that the authorities want to ban the practice of tethering. Mark, how is that going to affect things?
There's certain species that will always need that system in place, even if it's just for a short period. So I think we still need to find a way of being able to manage some birds being tethered for a portion of their time. There's going to have to be some kind of leeway into going, yes, you can tether this, but it's going to have to be off show. We need to come to some form of understanding. But we've all looked at it and sort of cringed a little bit and gone, this isn't going to work. But I do think that if we can do it, we should. Because, as I say, it will certainly appease the visitors. We seem to have forgotten that there's still a bird welfare issue in all this. We can't just take public perception as being what we should and shouldn't do in a zoo establishment. This is where we seem to have crossed a bit of a line at the minute, to a point where it's becoming very difficult to see where this is beneficial to the birds. And this is actually becoming more of, to say, erring on the side of what people's opinion is in regard to what is actually safer and a high standard of welfare for the animal itself. And again, we've seen it change very slowly in little ways. Jemima wrote the first guidelines for keeping birds of prey for zoo regulations. And I think in some ways we have to get out of this idea that whatever we do has to be for pleasing the public who are looking at it. And remember that the animals are actually the thing that we need to concentrate on. There's too much else going on to think about new zoo regulations at the minute. Obviously, bird flu has taken has taken the forefront of all that. And
Mark, what advice can you offer somebody wanting to work with birds of prey? I mean, should they be thinking, 10 years from now, should they be thinking, I need to get a PhD in vulture translocation, or what? What advice can you offer somebody wanting to go into any of the three areas that you've mentioned: commercial breeding, pest control, and display flying?
Volunteering, to me, is the best way you can get into anywhere, to be fair, because you'll struggle to find a way of getting into animals without somebody knowing sort of what goes on. If you can get in, and you can be in that position where somebody knows who you are and knows that you work hard.
Mark, is there anything that you'd like to add?
If I'm looking for somebody for a new job, I take very little notice of their CV. I get most of them in. Even if we just do a trial couple of days sometimes, from my centre perspective, I need you to be really good with people. Our whole days with people. Demo, you need to be outgoing and quite flamboyant with that. And actually, none of what you're doing is to do with the bird in a lot of cases. A lot of what you're doing is entertaining those people that are stood there. A bird presenter is very different to being a falconer. It's all very well and good being great with birds, but if you can't talk to people, then you're never going to be at a falconry centre, because that is all of your life. It's just entertaining people. Volunteer somewhere if you can. Just absorb as much of that knowledge and experience as you can, and that will take you far.
Mark, you're the director of 3 animal businesses, bird of prey related: Birdsall's Avian Solutions, Bay Tree Owl and Wildlife Centre. Thank you very much for your time. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for being on The Practical Animal. Mark Birdsall.